So is Jay Lucas headed to the Miami Hurricanes? Duke basketball also set to play Miami a little bit later tonight. What does it mean? All that and more here on Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us today on Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. We're proudly a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we're talking about the reports that came out on Saturday as Duke was set to take on Illinois inside Madison Square Garden. Not about the outcome of the game, but about the Duke coaching staff, with associate head coach Jay Lucas in a prime position to be named the next head coach of the Miami Hurricanes to compete against Duke in the same very conference. Kevin Connelly's back with us here once again today to talk about all of that and more. And oh yeah, to add a little bit more intrigue, our team's still trying to win the championship this year, and that journey continues a little bit later tonight when Duke takes on Miami for the second time this season. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review, if you would, whatever you listen to your podcast on. The algorithms love when you type out those 5-star written reviews. Also, watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, share it with your friends, comment on our YouTube feeds. Let us know if you're an everydayer. Really love building that YouTube community and appreciate all of our great fans that are out there within the Locked On Blue Devils world. So without further ado, Kevin Connelly is back here today. We're talking about the big changes possibly coming to Duke staff. Kevin, you were in the building on Saturday when these reports start coming out about Jay Lucas possibly departing Duke to be a head coach at just 36 years old. Catch us up to speed. How did all of this come to be? Take us through the whirlwind that was Saturday before this game even got going against Illinois.
Yeah, Saturday was kind of weird because you started hearing these rumors and some reports, unconfirmed reports started coming out that Miami is targeting Jay Lucas to be their head coach. And then that chatter grew louder and louder and louder as the day progressed forward. And I guess nothing official obviously has come out yet, even to this day. But it seems like right now all indications are that Jay Lucas is going to be the next head coach at Miami. And I think it's maybe a little surprising. Now, Jay Lucas certainly has the recruiting pedigree to be a college head coach. I think people are surprised that Miami went the unproven head coach route, as opposed to maybe getting someone from a mid-major that has performed very well and tried to lead their program. So I think it's interesting. And then obviously after the game, Jon Scheyer was asked about it and not necessarily asked to address the report that was made that Jay Lucas was going to be the next head coach of Miami, but kind of, do you think he is ready to be a head coach? And Jon Scheyer gave a glowing report and said, absolutely, he thinks he's ready to be a head coach. But he also kind of said that he wasn't privy to some of these reports that were coming out. He was just being made aware of it. These are his words right after the game. So obviously he probably got briefed very quickly after Duke walks off the floor at the Garden that there have been those reports, and it's likely he is going to get a question about it after the game. So I think I wouldn't say a lot of Duke fans are surprised. I think it had been trending this way. You probably thought it was typically going to be a mid-major first for a guy like Jay Lucas compared to just being thrown into the deep end of the pool at Miami. And I know there have been some Duke fans also who have maybe gotten their own head a little bit and started the question, well, Jay Lucas, if he was one of the primary recruiters for the Boozer twins and they were already considering going to Miami, having them really in their top two alongside of Duke, is there any chance that Jay Lucas could take the Boozer twins with him to Miami? So I think that's still premature because nothing has been finalized yet. I think it does put Jay Lucas and Duke in a little bit of a difficult position, assuming these reports are true and he does in fact become the Miami head coach, because the transfer portal is going to work a little bit different this year. Now, the transfer portal does not officially open until March 24th, which is the day after the second round, the round of 32 of the NCAA tournament, right before the week before the Sweet 16. So you assume Duke advances to the Sweet 16. They're going to be preparing for that second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And who knows what is happening with Jay Lucas in the timeline? Does Miami officially introduce him? Are they going to hold off until Duke's season ends to introduce him? But if he already knows he's going to be the Miami head coach, transfer portal moves very quickly.
Yeah.
It's going to have to get a head start on the transfer portal and getting players to Miami while still preparing with Duke for the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight, if that is the case. You see it all the time kind of with college football head coaches, whether they're coordinators in the national championship game and then they're becoming a head coach somewhere else, and it kind of works out. But I think this will be a very different basketball-wise, just because how much emphasis is put on the transfer portal at a school like Miami, who has a very good NIL and will be looking to kind of reset everything in their men's basketball program.
Yeah, it could be a nightmare in so many ways. And again, it's all the more crazy that Duke happens to be playing Miami, right? It's one thing that this report came out on Saturday. Oh, yeah, the very next ACC game that Duke is set to play is against Miami, and it's not in Cameron. We've already played them once in Cameron. We're going there. So I would imagine there's going to be more conversation and things that start to come out as we get closer to game time tonight. More conversations and quotes possibly from the head coach in Duke and John Shire into kind of what's going on, because this is not a position as associate head coach where we're going to get Jay Lucas on the record after games like this. At least that's not typically how things like this go. And it's just it's very interesting, the timing of all of this. Look, he's one of the top assistant coaches in the sport, played at Texas, was a Texas coach from 2016 to 2020, then went to Kentucky with Coach Calipari from 2020 to 2022, and he's been at Duke ever since. He's been an associate head coach for the Blue Devils since 2023. He is considered a primary recruiter on so many of the big gets that Duke has gotten over the season. I think if you give him way too much credit there, though, I don't want it to seem like John Shire has no impact or Chris Carrawell has no impact on those guys wanting to be there. I get the idea and the worry possibly that this could impact the Boozer twins and what they're going to do because of Jay Lucas there. I just don't see that. I don't see that happening. It feels too, like you said, premature a little bit to say, oh, if he gets this job, it for sure means that the Boozers aren't going to be playing at Duke.
Yeah, and I'm drawing a blank on the player's name, but it was very similar to an extent because he was an assistant head coach, not an associate head coach. But when Nolan Smith left Duke in that final year under Coach K to become a assistant coach at Louisville, and I think it was Caleb Foster, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Nolan Smith was the primary recruiter for Caleb Foster. And people had speculated, could he potentially take him to Louisville with him? And obviously that's not the case. Caleb Foster now in his second season at Duke. So I think it is interesting. You kind of mentioned you're not going to get Jay Lucas on the record. Certainly it would be unlikely if he holds a press conference. I know sometimes at various points in the season, maybe associate head coaches would, although it is rare. More often than not, you'll get a beat reporter or somebody have an interview with him, and then a story will come out. But if you are that Miami media and you cover Miami men's basketball, you're certainly going to make it known that you are at this game. And I would imagine Duke is filled with requests regarding the topic of Jay Lucas and his status going forward with the team. And then I will say, as many would expect, it did say Jay Lucas would be expected to remain with Duke throughout the rest of the season. So, but obviously you have to imagine you'd have at least one eye towards building a staff and building the rest of his program at Miami, you'd think, right?
All right, so let's talk about this a little bit more. Big news with the Duke basketball program. And, oh, yeah, we're set to play the Hurricanes a little bit later tonight. We'll continue this conversation after we take our first break here on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. That's right, March basketball is here. It's right around the corner, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less than on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy, and it keeps every game exciting. This week, you can look at all the great lineups and pick more or less than in point totals, rebounds, assists, and so many other of those counting stats that we love to follow along in basketball. Again, quick and easy, fast payouts, and so many great deals to be aware of. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Prize Picks is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. So Jay Lucas could be the next head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. That's what we're hearing. That's what we're discussing here on today's show. And Duke is set to play Miami a little bit later tonight. I'm JJ Jackson. He's Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham. This news started to pick up wind well before the game took place against Illinois on Saturday. If you missed our conversation on yesterday's show, make sure you go back and listen to it. I know our everydayers loved it because we talked about an absolute beatdown that the Blue Devils had of the Fighting Illini by 43 points. But there's Canes Insider. There's Adam Zagori of the New York Times. I know Pete Thamel and Jeff Borzello from ESPN were working around the clock trying to put things together in terms of the reporting for this Jay Lucas story. Jim Larrañaga stepped down as the Miami head coach in December amidst his 14th season as head coach of the Hurricanes. And now they're trying to figure out what's next. These reports come out. A deal is not yet to be completed. And also the reporting reads that the job has not formally been offered, nor is a deal expected to be imminent. Super, super interesting, those details, Kevin. Seems like there's still more vetting, interviews. I don't know exactly what this looks like, but we're talking about the timeline from the Duke perspective and going through a tournament run. There is still a timeline because Miami wants to get a new coach in. They want to get recruiting for the next year, but there are still more bridges to cross, it appears.
Well, yeah, you know, when you get in these situations like this, when pen hasn't been signed to paper yet, you are going to get some of those details. I don't think that necessarily means it's not true or it's not happening. It's just kind of how the process all unfolds, where if through back channels, Miami is saying, hang on a second, we haven't made a decision yet. We still have more things to do in our hiring process. Duke kind of saying, oh, we don't know what's going on. We're fully focused on the season. I would imagine there have been a ton of conversations. Duke lands in Miami, I'm guessing probably Monday after today, this afternoon. And then, but by the time they head out after the game, Tuesday night, I would imagine there'll be a lot of conversations involving the Duke brass, the Miami brass, and Jay Lucas as well.
All right, so now we get set to actually play a game against the Hurricanes where Jay Lucas, we talk about the recruiting. He's also credited as being Duke's defensive coordinator over the last few seasons, and the offense has been so special for Duke this year. But look at the first 2 years of head coach John Shire making this crazy hire of going outside the Brotherhood tree to bring in Jay Lucas as his assistant coach. And now the defense has been incredible the last few seasons. It's been really fun to watch. It's a Duke defense that earlier in the year when they played Miami, a very bad Miami team that is, back on January 14th, only allowed 54 points to be scored as Duke won the first meeting 89-54 over the Hurricanes.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, I hate to put it like this, but like the more interesting thing to talk about with this game is Jay Lucas and his potential departure from Duke and going to Miami than the actual game on the court, because that's kind of just what it's been like for Miami this season. I mean, they are one of the worst teams, if not the worst power conference team in the country. They're 6-21. They're 2-14 in ACC play. They're not going to make the ACC tournament in a couple of weeks. So their season will be probably one of the first power conference team season that is over. I know there's a handful of other teams in other conferences like the Big Ten that don't make the conference tournament. But once that final regular season game comes for Miami, barring a miracle, and I mean, they have games against Duke and North Carolina still left on their schedule, their season's going to be over. So going back to what we started this podcast talking about and Jay Lucas, they'll be probably ready to introduce a new head coach within the next 7 to 10 days of their season officially ending. But then who knows how that process is going to go down with Jay Lucas still in the middle of a season and the middle of a postseason run with a Duke team that has expectations of winning a national championship.
All right, well, to refresh people's memories a little bit more, again, 89-54 back on January 14th. Con Knippel led the way for Duke over Miami with 25 points in that game. Cooper Flagg had 13 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. Malawach had 12 points and what remains to be his career high, 15 rebounds in that game. Mason Gillis had 12 points, one of his better scoring performances for Duke, on 4 of 6 shooting from three-point range. Caleb Foster added 9. Sion James had 5. And then notably, Tyrese Proctor was held scoreless, did not make a single shot in his 23 minutes of action in that game. So Duke scored 89 total against the Hurricanes without Proctor adding anything. And then Miami offensively was led by the big fella in the interior, Lynn Kidd, who played for Virginia Tech last season. He finished with 20 points on 10 of 17 shooting from the floor. But outside of that, the Hurricanes didn't get much offense at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it's been for them this season. But from the Duke side, it was that part of the season where Tyrese Proctor was really struggling and then had turned it on as of late. And also should be noted, this was one of the Duke's first games, if not their first game, without Malik Brown, who was dealing with a toe injury. So Malik Brown didn't play against Miami in Cameron's, not going to play against Miami in Coral Gables. And, I think it's interesting travel for Duke. So you leave Madison Square Garden late on Saturday night. You probably don't arrive back in Durham until very early hours of Sunday morning. And then you turn around, you have Sunday probably off from practice. It's more of a film and recovery day. And then you practice today before you leave to go down to Miami, get there tonight, get ready to go and play a game on Tuesday. So yeah, kind of a weird travel schedule, getting on a lot of planes in a short amount of time to play a couple of games.
We'll see how Duke does, taking on Miami for the second time. They're favored by a ton, and we'll see if the Blue Devils are able to pick up their 16th win in ACC play already this season. We'll take one more break here on today's show of Locked On Blue Devils, and then start to wrap up our conversation here on this episode. Okay, March Madness is right around the corner, and now is as good of a time as ever to let you know about Locked On College Basketball. As always, thank you for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen today. But go check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and review here on Locked On Blue Devils. Do the same for Locked On College Basketball. Subscribe to our YouTube channels as well. Really do appreciate all of the support. We've got Kevin Connelly here with us on the program today from Ball Durham. We're talking about Duke as they get set to take on the Hurricanes in this Tuesday night game as the Blue Devils right now 15-1 in the league. They've got 4 games left to take on Miami, Florida State, Wake Forest, and North Carolina. The 2 road games, of course, this one against Miami, and then a game coming up against the Tar Heels at the end of the season on the road, sandwiched in between a quick Monday turnaround for Duke when they take on Florida State and Wake Forest. What do you make of this stretch of the last 4 ACC games for the Blue Devils?
Well, I'll be pretty frank with you, JJ. Not worried in the least about a game against Miami and then a game at home against Florida State. You think you wouldn't be worried at home in a game against Wake Forest? I mean, they've kind of seen their NCAA tournament hopes go up in smoke over the last couple of weeks, losing at home to Florida State and then losing by double digits on the road against NC State. And we've kind of seen that over the past couple of years, right? It's a Wake Forest team that is always right there on the bubble. You think if they can just hold serve, they'd be in, and then things don't go their way, they lose, and they find themselves out. Wake Forest, not to go on a detailed conversation here about Wake Forest, but they play Virginia and they play Notre Dame before they play Duke on March 3rd. And assuming they win those 2 games at home, which I guess is a big assumption, which the way they've played over the past couple of weeks, their season comes down to beating Duke. I mean, if they can beat Duke, they could theoretically have a shot at getting back into the NCAA tournament with a decent run in the ACC tournament the following week. So I think Duke is going to face a very desperate Wake Forest team. And then in the regular season finale against North Carolina, I'm imagining Duke is going to go in as a favorite. They are the better team. They beat them pretty good in Durham. But when you're playing a rivalry game on the road like in North Carolina, as they say, the record books go out the window. So Duke will be a favorite in all 4 of their games. I think they should probably win the first 3 pretty easily. And then once you're going on the road against Carolina, it's kind of who knows what could happen. Because for Carolina, they're also playing for their NCAA tournament lives. They're picking up victories over these last couple of weeks. None of them very significant because of the poor ACC. Since they lost, they got killed by Clemson. They defeated Syracuse, NC State, Virginia. And then coming down the stretch, they play Miami and Virginia Tech. Not that none of those games are going to do anything for you if you win. The big game is Duke to try to push them back into the field as well.
All right, so then ACC historians are looking at what North Carolina did last year. The Tar Heels went 17-3 in ACC play. They set the record for the 20-game ACC schedule. Duke's in a good position to do that, being favored in these last 4 games. Ken Pom loves them. Vegas loves Duke to win out. The ESPN basketball analytics loves Duke to win out. Does it feel, you don't want to say certain in a sport like this, but in some ways, does it feel like a certainty that Duke at least ties that 17-3 record in league play, knowing that they would have to go 2-2 from here on out to tie the best record that we've seen so far in ACC play?
I think it feels like a certainty they're going to break it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, kind of what I just detailed. Like I said, I think they should easily win their next 3 games against Miami, Florida State, and Wake Forest. And then you break it right there, no matter what you do in that regular season finale against North Carolina. So not only do I think it's a certainty that they're going to tie it, I think it's almost a certainty that they're going to break it, and at worst finish 18-2 in the conference.
Who's a pick to click tonight, Kevin? Like who's a player to watch for Duke in this game against Miami? Who you feeling? Who's got the good vibes in terms of a big offensive game? Is it Proctor get back for going scoreless in the first meeting between these 2 teams? Is it Mason Gillis stepping up with another double-digit scoring outing against the Canes? Who do you like tonight from a scoring perspective?
I'm going to ride the hot hand. I'm going to go with Isaiah Evans.
I love it.
Game against Illinois, kind of seeing some more minutes as we progress forward through this season, expecting Duke to have a sizable lead kind of throughout. So maybe he gets more minutes than he's accustomed to, playing nearly 20 minutes per game against Miami. And I could see him getting hot from 3-point range as well.
All right, let's see how this game plays out. Let's see if Duke's able to pick up the win over the Hurricanes a little bit later tonight. Let's see how the Miami reporters feast on Jon Scheyer being there to ask him about his associate head coach and Jay Lucas, who could be the next head basketball coach for the Miami Hurricanes. And I know all of that coverage is going to be found over at Ball Durham, Kevin.
Yes, sir. BallDurham.com. Come read us every day. Follow us on social media at Ball_Durham. We really appreciate everybody's support, and come giving us a click every day.
Talk to you soon, Kevin.
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Follow him on X at Kevin Connelly24 and support all the great work that he does. Make sure that you check us out on X at LO_Blue Devils. I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Comment down below what you think about Jay Lucas possibly going to Miami. Also, who could be options to replace him as an assistant coach on Jon Scheyer's staff? I'd love to know what you're thinking in that regard as well. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.